You know, with each legislative session, the space where communities like mine as a gay teacher and a parent are smaller and smaller that we're allowed in schools, and that's not okay. But regardless of whether you're from a marginalized community, whether you're part of the LGBTQ community, part of communities of color, teachers are scared. Teachers support kids no matter what they look like or what their families looks like. And the law is frightening, especially given that there's no guidance from the Department of Education. The law is written in a way that is rooted in bias, but at the same way somewhat vague and open to a lot of interpretation.
We'll stand together till our rights are won. There once was an ordinance that made a lot of sense. For days and nights we had our rights, not knowing they would need defense. When some bigots tried to say, let's take our rights away, we'll make them pay the ones who say they're proud of being gay. Oh, you can't stand.
About 2,500 opponents of the repeal effort marched from the Capitol in St. Paul to the City Hall. Then they marched back to the Capitol, where songs and speeches continued into the late evening hours. Who did speak was the Reverend Marvin Grunke of Lutheran Social Services in Minneapolis.
We can quote scripture too. The ancient prophet Micah declared long ago, "He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with thy God." It is out of that great religious tradition that so many of our church leaders have spoken to our citizens at this critical time in our city. They have spoken carefully, for they fully realize that the questions raised by sexual differences are indeed difficult ones. But our religious leaders have spoken out clearly because they too know how easily fear and misunderstanding and irrationality can take over. Make no mistake about it, as one of them has written, the issue is one of civil rights, and the recognition that the denial of civil rights of gays is rooted in prejudice. Quite apart from the Christian belief in the inestimable value of every person. At stake are basic human rights, which are to be guaranteed to every person without prejudice. To forget that is to set the conditions once again out of which the Holocaust comes. As Wayne Clymer, resident bishop of the United Methodist Church, warns, it is an exceedingly dangerous procedure to deny the civil rights of persons on the grounds that we disapprove of their manners. This is not only a violation of democracy, it is an affront to the Christian respect of persons.
This law was rooted in bias, and I feel like the lack of guidance given by the Department of Education is the Reynolds administration really counting on the bias that exists in some communities in Iowa. We know that this law was targeted towards the LGBTQ community, even though we weren't specifically mentioned in the legislation. I believe that our state is counting on school districts leaning towards the lesser angels in their heads and really amplifying that bias, and I don't believe that most Iowans are okay with that. Iowa has a strong tradition of accepting all other Iowans, and you know, we're not seeing that anymore, whether it's women, whether it's communities of color, the LGBTQ community. More and more Iowans are being excluded from the public sphere. And I can't believe that most Iowans are okay with that. Iowans are nice. Our legislature has not been, and it's got to end.